Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Piss. This is Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 19th of June 2025, and this is a Geopolitics video. Let's start with a quote from Andriy Sybiha, the Foreign Minister for Ukraine, saying it's been exactly 100 days since Russia rejected the basic first step towards peace. 100 days of Russian manipulation and missed opportunities to end the war. 100 days during which Russia has intensified its terror against Ukraine instead of stopping it. This is building on, I think, what Zelenskyy said yesterday, which is the only thing that's happened since Trump's come in is that actually the Russians have intensified their Shahid attacks on Ukraine. There's been an slight increase, particularly in May, of territorial gains from the Russians. So whatever the Americans are doing at the moment, it's not working. Whatever the Europeans are doing, it's not working. There needs to be greater support for Ukraine militarily and greater sanctions on Russia. And of course, certainly Europe is trying to do that. Canada and Australia as well, putting on sanctions. We'll come to that in a second. Of the Russians, just that one big nation that's missing in terms of that kind of activity. Well, Russia has now said that they are ready to resume talks with the Ukraine in Istanbul after June the 22nd. And that's according to Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova. Exact dates for the new round of negotiations will be announced soon. But again, it's going to be, let's face it, more of nothing. You know, there needs to be pressure on Russia, sanctions pressure, economic pressure. Now, sadly, the Senate reportedly delays Russian sanctions or the bill on Russian sanctions as Middle East crisis worsens. Trump's tax bill also takes priority. The US Senate is postponing action on that bipartisan Lindsey Graham, Richard Blumenthal Russia sanctions bill until at least July, as other legislative and foreign policy priorities dominate the agenda, according to Semaphore, as they reported yesterday. That is bad news. I had all my hopes pinned on Lindsey Graham. It was unlikely that he was going to be able to push that through, considering the pushback from the Trump administration on this. Trump's been very clear that it's costly to put, this is what he claimed at the G7, it's costly to put sanctions on any country, here particularly Russia, and he wants to wait to see if an agreement is signed. I've already pointed out that makes no sense. It's the wrong way around. You don't put sanctions on someone after they sign an agreement. You put it on so that they sign an agreement. And then he said he wants to see Europe do something first. Europe haven't done anything. And he said that as Europe are trying to implement their 18th round of sanctions, and the UK also whacked on extra sanctions from their long list of sanctions. So, yeah, essentially, the Trump administration really doesn't want to help Ukraine, and booting the Senate bill into the long grass is just more evidence of that. It's just really obvious now. Now, we then hear the Times reported that Trump won't meet Zelenskyy at the NATO summit days after skipping him at the G7. Trump skipped the meeting with Zelenskyy in Canada and won't face him in The Hague either in the upcoming Hague NATO summit. Then we heard Zelenskyy and Trump may meet on June the 24th, according to Radio Liberty. A working dinner is planned for this day as part of the NATO summit in The Hague, at which, according to journalist interlocutors, the leader of both countries will be present. Then we hear that because of Trump, the NATO summit will last only 2.5 hours, and Zelenskyy has been invited, but a change of the level of participation has taken place, in particular to avoid any awkward meetings with Trump. I mean, goodness me, it's just pandering to Trump, walking on eggshells. It's really frustrating. Now, we hear that Trump left. We know that Trump left the G7 early because, so he claims, you know, the important business of Iran, Israel. But what happened when he got back is actually, and you can see this from his Truth Social post, but also this, he spent a lot of time outside with, I mean, it's funny that you've got the digger driver asleep at the wheel there. But he's been putting flag installations in the White House. So he's putting 2 flagpoles, I believe. And that's the main thing he's been concerned with, according to at least his social media and media appearances. So I'm going to leave the G7. We've got some serious stuff to be thinking about concerning Israel and Iran. Goes back and then faffs around far too much on stuff like this, which shows, I think, a contempt for the G7. That some people saying the real reason he left G7 was to kind of stick his fingers up at the other world leaders, saying that this is not important as I am, and I can leave here early, go back and install some flagpoles. That's how much I don't care about the G7. And I think there's nothing to suggest otherwise, particularly there. I mean, obviously, Iran and Israel is an important agenda item too. Now, he has had a number of these kind of press briefings, including with those workmen. That, by the way, have I got it here at all? Like that in that presser around there, where he had the workers behind him, and then was questioned on Israel and Iran and Ukraine and all sorts, was one of the single worst pressers I've seen. Honestly, Trump was an absolute mess. It was all over the shop. It was an absolute shocker. And then he absolutely berates Caitlin Collins at CNN for being at CNN. He gets asked a difficult question and he doesn't answer it and attacks. He cannot be asked a difficult question. He will just attack the people that ask him difficult questions for being, rubbish media or whatever. It's just so weak. But I guess it kind of works, doesn't it? He insulates himself from being challenged, and so therefore he never gets challenged and always seems therefore to be succeeding. Never put under any difficult pressure because he berates difficult questions. Now, he was talking about the war in Ukraine here, amongst other things, as being, wars are terrible, too many people dying, all that kind of stuff, as we often hear from him. And then there was this. It's just absolutely...
Especially with war. Things change with war. It can go from one extreme to the other. War is very bad. There was no reason for this to be a war. There was no reason for Russia, Ukraine. A lot of wars there was no reason for. You look right up there, I don't know, see the Declaration of Independence, and I say, I wonder if the Civil War, it always seemed to me maybe that could have been solved without losing 600,000 plus people.
A lot of people saying that, hang on, do you think the Civil War was part of the Declaration of Independence, or the Declaration of Independence was part of the Civil War? Like, have you got your history that wrong, that you're conflating the War of Independence and the Civil War? You look up there, Declaration of Independence, Civil War, lost 600,000 people, they didn't need to. And then are you saying that you didn't need to lose any people in the War of Independence, which is what got you your independence? It's just, he's such a mess. He's such a mess.
The Civil War, it always seemed to me maybe that could have been solved without losing 600,000 plus people. So a lot of, it's very sad to see. It's very sad to see what's happening for, You look right up there, I don't know, see the Declaration of Independence, and I say, I wonder if the Civil War, it always seemed to me.
Absolute mess. Right, then we hear that Bridget Brink, the former ambassador to Ukraine from the US, resigned in protest to Trump's policy of putting pressure on Kyiv instead of Moscow to end Russia's war, has formally announced her decision to run to challenge Representative Tom Barrett in Michigan's 7th Congressional District. She'll do that as a Democrat. She has said things in the past, such as, unfortunately, President Trump keeps pressuring our democratic ally Ukraine rather than the aggressor Russia. Appeasing a dictator never has and never will achieve a lasting peace, and it's just not who we are. So that's what she had said, things like that, a number of times subsequent to her resigning from that role of ambassador to Ukraine. And it's evident that, from someone who should know the most, like she's right in the middle of mediating the relationship between the United States, the Trump administration, and Ukraine. For her to resign because of the absolute shocking approach of the Americans tells you all you need to know about the American approach. She is the one who is in the greatest position, arguably, to properly understand American foreign policy vis-a-vis Ukraine, and she resigns as a result of it. Just incredible. Now, Australia has imposed sanctions on 60 Russian tankers that were used to circumvent oil restrictions and finance war. I think this is the first time Australia has done this. I reported this yesterday, Andrew Yermak saying that. So that is good news. And of course, the UK put extra sanctions on Shadow Fleet as well. We've got the EU doing that with the 18th package of sanctions. And then we have, as mentioned, Trump saying, well, I'm going to wait for Europe to do something. They haven't done anything yet. Kaja Kallas says if we don't, so from the EU, if we don't help Ukraine further, we should all start learning Russian. This is a kind of trope that we've seen a number of times. She called Ukraine Europe's first line of defense, stressing the importance of piling on the pressure on Russia with sanctions as Moscow responds to strength and nothing else. Quote, we have to do more for Ukraine, for our security too. The stronger Ukraine is on the battlefield today, the stronger they will be around the negotiation table when Russia finally is ready to talk. And then we have good news for those who are not big fans of Viktor Orbán. Hungary's corrupt leadership is siding with the Kremlin and has made it the poorest nation in the EU. Kyiv Insider reports Orbán's Hungary is now officially the poorest nation in the EU. Even EU funds have been funneled into the pockets of Orbán's cronies and family members. This is a very important data point concerning Hungary. It should be used by journalists when they are speaking to Trump and Trump brings up Viktor Orbán. He consistently says Viktor Orbán, he's a strong man. He's the best leader in Europe. They don't like him much there, but he's the strongest leader. The comeback to Trump there should be, Mr. Trump, you do realise that Viktor Orbán, the leader that you admire the most in Europe, has taken Hungary to now be the most corrupt and the poorest nation, or it's either one of the most corrupt or the most corrupt, but certainly now the poorest nation in Europe. Is that the sign of a strong leader? Is that the kind of leadership you aspire to? Just asking. Now, here we have Nexta reporting that Orban may lose power. He has the general election next year in 2026. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán could be ousted as support for the opposition party TISZA surges. According to the latest polls, the new opposition force has not only overtaken the ruling Fidesz party, but now holds a significant lead, around 15%, according to this particular poll. TISZA currently polls at 51%, while Fidesz stands at 36%. Well, Politico's poll of polls here has them on average 8% higher than Fidesz. So TISZA on 43, but you can see the direction of travel there. Fidesz going down, particularly from where it was at this high back in July of last year. Now still continuing to go down as TISZA goes up, and that hopefully that trend will continue. But that is I wonder, what the exact poll, the latest poll is, or who did it. But certainly it seems like in this poll, there's a 15%, not an 8% difference, a 15% difference between TISZA on 51% and Fidesz on 36%. Pollsters say that this level of support is enough for the opposition to score a decisive victory in the next parliamentary elections. Similar to the landslides Fidesz enjoyed in previous years, Hungary's next parliamentary elections are scheduled for spring next year. So actually, they will come around fairly soon. You'd imagine things would tighten up before then, unless there are more scandals, and really there should be, because Viktor Orbán and his family have been greasing the wheels of their money machine for many years on the back of their population, or on the back of taxpayers, on the back of the EU. So he needs to be found out there. Right. We're now going to go to Poland, where there's some fascinating news coming out. So it looks like there are accusations that the PIS party, the Law and Justice Party of the previous president, might be behind vote rigging for the new president, he started off as an independent, became backed by the PIS. A Polish MP and lawyer has alleged presidential vote fraud. Quote, this morning I went to the Supreme Court after my informants told me yesterday that the protocols received from district courts, the recount reports from local electoral commissions, showed evidence of electoral fraud in almost every case, said Roman Giertych during a live-streamed statement on his YouTube channel. So what do we have? There's been basically filings to legally, just filing a legally valid request to review the recount protocols. It's all going off there, it seems. Now, The Supreme Court is under pressure over election complaints and recount calls. As of Wednesday, the Supreme Court had registered around 7,900 election protests, with many more still under review. According to recent findings from money.pl, that number could approach 35,000. The court must issue a final ruling on the election's validity by July the 2nd after considering all complaints. Nearly 300,000 people have signed a petition demanding a full recount of the presidential vote. The official results showed Karol Nawrocki, backed by the populist Law and Justice Party, PIS, winning the second round by over 369,000 votes, ahead of the pro-European centrist Rafał Trzaskowski, the mayor of Warsaw. Although Donald Tusk has said, no one in Poland should question the results of the presidential election, you don't want this to be a Trumpian kind of outright denial. There does seem to be some pretty controversial there are controversial claims concerning this. It looks like there could be some controversial data. So this source says investigation is being launched into possible massive election fraud in Poland. Anomalies have been found in over 1,400 district offices, and this is just the beginning. Presidential election may have been rigged by the far-right PIS party. This could blow the whole thing wide open. Okay, that's fairly bombastic. But we have a Chris Wiki thread on this. So Poland's Electoral Commission, he says, has said that there were, quote, major irregularities in the second round of the recent presidential election, won narrowly by Karol Nawrocki. Votes appear to have been recorded wrongly or transferred to the wrong candidate. Nawrocki, a pro-Trump figure representing the right-wing PIS party, won by only 360,000 votes. The National Election Commission says there were incidents that could have an impact on the outcome of the vote, requiring, quote, an in-depth analysis of the reasons. It highlights, quote, the occurrence of repetitive errors in the protocols of some district election commissions, consisting in incorrect assignment of the number of votes cast for individual candidates, and has referred the matter to Poland's Supreme Court. Problems have been identified in 50 electoral regions in which there were concerns that votes have been wrongly assigned, most notably in the district of Krakow, known as a stronghold of the rival Civic Platform Party. Nawrocki's vote increased by 500%. He won in a landslide. The vote in a neighbouring district, also a civil platform stronghold, was held in the same building. In this instance, Nawrocki's vote remained consistent with the first round, and he lost by 63.84% to 36.16%. He won only 26% in another neighbouring district. Similar problems have been reported across Poland, where the increase in Nawrocki's results amounted to as much as 400% in some areas. This would require not only his own voters to stick with him, but for significant numbers of Civic Platform voters to have voted for him. The Electoral Commission says that the problem appears to have arisen in transferring the data from the paper count of ballots to the National Electoral Computer System. The data was entered by an operator who received it from the electoral district chairman. Usually only the chairman and operator were present for this, with the data transmitted verbally or in writing. The computer system worked alphabetically and always listed Nawrocki first for data entry, ahead of Civic Platform candidate Rafał Trzaskowski. However, the paper count in each district could list either Nawrocki or Trzaskowski first, depending on who had the highest number of votes. It's suspected that the districts where Trzaskowski won, his votes were erroneously entered for Nawrocki. So it might not actually be that this is done on purpose by vote riggers, but actually the system was confusing. So one system, you had whoever got the most votes was first on the list, but for the computer it was always Nawrocki that was first on the list. So you would end up putting the leading stats in, or you could end up putting the leading stats in for Nawrocki even if Trzaskowski had won. So yeah, to make matters worse, it's reported that nobody checked whether the data was entered into the system correctly, despite the entire Electoral Commission for each district signing off the results. It's unclear what will happen next. The Supreme Court's control chamber says it will check the results for 13 districts. A complicating factor is that the control chamber is comprised of so-called neo-judges, PIS supporters installed irregularly to control the judiciary. So this is one of the controversies of the PIS rule before the Civic Coalition came into power with Tusk, is that they rigged the judiciary, and there is still an issue with this at the level of what we're talking about here. During its time in office, PIS created quasi-judicial bodies such as the Control Chamber, stacked with its own supporters. European tribunals, the Supreme Court itself, and the government say that the Control Chamber is not a valid court of law. Watch out watch this space. That looks absolutely fascinating. And it could be that you might get a presidential election vote recount in Poland. Right, we're now going to go to, well, actually, there is a segue of this entailing Russia here, but we're going to go to Iran and Israel. We're going to start with the Russian Foreign Ministry issuing a warning that against the US providing military assistance to Israel.
Russian Foreign Ministry has been speaking about the conflict between Israel and Iran. The IFAX news agency is reporting that the Russian Foreign Ministry says, we caution US against direct military assistance to Israel, even thinking about it. They continue, possible direct military assistance from the US to Israel could radically destabilize the situation in the Middle East. And they also say that Russia is in contact with both Iran and Israel. So new lines regarding the current conflict between Israel and Iran coming out of Russia, primarily saying that direct military assistance from the US to Israel could, in their words, radically destabilize the situation in the Middle East. It says it's cautioning against that, cautioning against even thinking about that, and is in contact with both sides in that conflict, that coming from the Russian Foreign Ministry.
I talked about this in my addendum video that's just been released concerning my justification for military action against targeted nuclear facilities particularly. I have loads of caveats for my support for the military intervention, and it is not particularly strong, my support. It is, I just about support it. But I did talk in that, and I forgot to mention this last night in my previous video. I did mention that it's so potentially really important for Ukraine here that Iran's military gets decapitated because their military and their military industrial complex has been supporting Russia. And although they have said we can't support Russia with any more equipment because we need it all now, like Iran falling apart militarily is good for Ukraine. They are an ally of Russia. They're a close ally of Russia. It is good that Iran are in trouble if we are concerned for Ukraine. And there's also this other benefit of the US siding with Israel. Aside from issues with Israel otherwise, just concentrate on this. So the US sides with Israel against Iran, and Russia have given a warning to the US about supporting Israel, then that pits Russia directly against Trump, more so than the US in general. And if Trump is then against Putin, you have a much greater possibility for the US to then be on the side of Ukraine, as it kind of reestablishes old Cold War positioning, essentially. You get this Trump alignment with the neocons, the Republican neocons, such as Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham, more formally in terms of Israel and Iran, and by extension, that reestablishes the line in the sand where Russia's over there and the US is over here. And again, that could help Ukraine. So that is, I think, an important dimension to consider here. And I think Russia coming out formally against the US and warning them not to aid Israel here, if Trump ends up aiding Israel, then that could all benefit Ukraine, or not. Or, I think there's a greater chance it can benefit Ukraine than not. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said Russia is ready to provide humanitarian assistance to Iran if necessary. So here it does seem like we have Russia picking sides there much more formally. Now, Trump then came out and said quite a lot of stuff. Let's listen to him at what I think is this is the disastrous presser that was just full of nonsense.
Justin. I know a lot of people from Iran, from New York, from Washington, mostly from New York. They're incredible people. They're smart. They're energetic. They can be difficult, but so can you. No, they're great people. And they're smart people. And those people are getting the hell beat out of them now. And it's really a shame. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. It's another one, Russia, Ukraine is so stupid. Would have never happened if I was president. You guys agree with that, right? Would have never happened if I was president. Putin would have never done it. And I spoke to him yesterday, and I said, he actually offered to help mediate. I said, do me a favor. Mediate your own. Let's mediate Russia first, okay? I said, Vladimir, let's mediate Russia first. You can worry about this later. But I think that's going to work out too. But it's so many people have been killed. The big thing with that one is far more people are dead than have been reported in the Ukraine, Russia. Many, many more people. A building falls down. They say nobody was hurt. It's like ridiculous.
So some people are saying that this has shown that Trump is willing to be harsh against Putin, as if he's like, yeah, get real, you need to sort out your own problem first. I imagine he didn't speak to Putin in that way. I mean, that's how he's communicating it now, but it was probably quite a fawning conversation with his lover boy there or something.
Unconditional surrender. Two very simple words. A very simple, unconditional surrender. That means I've had it. Okay, I've had it. I give up. No more. Then we go blow up all the all the nuclear stuff that's all over the place there.
Then we go and blow up all the nuclear stuff that's all over the place there. He's so unprofessional with his communication in terms of really serious foreign policy. We're talking about destroying another nation's nuclear capabilities here, and he's like, yeah, we're just going to go and blow up a bunch of nuclear stuff.
No, they had bad intentions. For 40 years they've been saying death to America, death to Israel, death to anybody else that they didn't like. They were bullies. They were schoolyard bullies. And now they're not bullies anymore, but we'll see what happens. Look, nothing's finished until it's finished. War is very complex. A lot of bad things can happen. A lot of turns are made. So I don't know. I wouldn't say that we won anything yet. I would say that we sure as hell made a lot of progress. And we'll see. The next week is going to be very big. Maybe less than a week. Maybe less. But is there anybody here that said it would be okay to have a hostile, very, zealots really, but to have a hostile country have a nuclear weapon that could destroy 25 miles, but much more than that, could destroy other nations just by the breeze blowing the dust.
Now, although I've said that I somewhat support very precise strikes against Iran and taking out their nuclear capabilities, just remember that if he does do that, he's massively hypocritical. So that, although I might say, and it depends what the US do, but at the moment I might say I tentatively support US support of Israel in particular ways, not overtly, not boots on the ground, refueling, intelligence, maybe a B-2 bomber to take out Natanz, that kind of thing. So if I tentatively support them, I can also say that Trump is a massive hypocrite for doing that, because he was on the campaign trail saying, close to another world war in the Middle East, and slagged off Biden for this and slagged off Obama previous, and so on and so forth. And he's just doing exactly the same.
That dust blows to other nations and they get decimated. This is just not a threat you can have. And we've been threatened by Iran for many years. If you go back and look at my history, if you go back 15 years, I was saying we cannot let Iran get a nuclear weapon. I've been saying it for a long time. And I mean it more now than I ever meant it. Yeah.
So on and so forth. So Shashank Joshi here says, an American attack on Iran is now likely. Quote, President Trump told senior aides late Tuesday that he approved of attack plans for Iran, but was holding off to see if Tehran would abandon its nuclear program. People familiar with the deliberations said, which actually, yeah, okay, that sounds good. Put pressure on, put diplomatic pressure on, and see if they capitulate, and then they agree to give up nuclear. I mean, if they agree, like if the strike stopped now and Iran agree to just give it all up and please stop, then I think that is a good outcome. And you might argue about the technical legality of Israel going in and doing those strikes, but if they were precise, they did mitigate against civilian losses, and they forced Iran to give up its nuclear intentions, then I would take that. Honestly, I would take that. And that's the point, is like a theocratic dictatorship with nuclear missiles nuclear capabilities is not cool. The world is a better place without that. But what's interesting, and like I said in previous videos, that this is completely splitting the MAGA support base, both in, well, I don't think it's splitting it so much on the ground. There are some, I think, some pretty sizable demographic statistics in support of what Trump is doing with regard to supporting Israel and striking Iran, if indeed that happens, from his base. But the thinkers in there, your Steve Bannon and your Marjorie Taylor Greene, thinker, and your Tucker Carlsons of the world, these people are really pushing back. So Caitlin Collins asks, Trump is, if, and I presume many of you have seen that, or at least clips of Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson going at it. And Tucker Carlson actually makes mincemeat of Ted Cruz, and it's pretty embarrassing. Although there is an issue with Ted Cruz not knowing the population of Iran. Doesn't, like, I may look at a gang like destroying Doris's house, right? I'm going to call the police, and the police aren't going to tell me. They are going to ask me how many people I think are there. But if I say, oh, I don't know, it's not like the police are going to go, oh, we won't come round then. If you don't know how many people are there, then that affects the moral evaluation. So we're not going to come around and help Doris. I'd be like, hang on, like, I don't know, there could be 4, there could be 44. Like, it's bad. Whatever they're doing is bad. So although Tucker Carlson had Ted Cruz on the ropes, some of the lines of questioning were a little bit, I think, sort of unfair, as in they don't really have that much power. But because he made Ted Cruz look like a blathering idiot, it appeared that line of questioning was more potent than it really was. But anyway, that's my opinion. But it was an embarrassment because you had Ted Cruz, who's now, even though Trump insulted his wife and blah, 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 and all that history with Ted Cruz is a massive supporter of Trump. And Tucker Carlson is a massive supporter of Trump. So you have this chasm that is, or certainly it is a fracture within the MAGA Republican Party at the moment that could get wider and wider. Now, I think this response from Trump is very interesting.
Have you seen the Tucker Carlson and Senator Ted Cruz interview? It seems like this issue on whether or not the United States should strike is kind of dividing a lot of your supporters.
No, my supporters are for me. My supporters are America first. They make America great again. My supporters don't want to see Iran have a nuclear weapon. Tucker's a nice guy. He called and apologized the other day.
He called and apologized. Now, if that's true, wow, like, what does that mean? He apologized for doing a really good, hard interview of Ted Cruz, holding Ted Cruz to account to some large degree. Then he phones up Trump to apologize that he made Ted Cruz look like a plonker, which then goes back to Tucker Carlson just being obsequious and genuflecting to the dear leader there. Whereas actually, otherwise, he's been saying that effectively Trump is wrong in going to war with Iran, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I don't know.
Because he thought he said things that were a little bit too strong, and I appreciated that. And Ted Cruz is a nice guy. I mean, he's been with me for a long time. I'd say
not what you said when you were campaigning against him.
Once the race was over, he's been with me ever since, right?
Once the race was over.
Very simple. If they think that it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon, then they should oppose me. But nobody thinks it's okay.
So there is this fracture, but that's quite revealing, I think, if that's a fair representation of as to what happened. So lots of other elements from this presser again.
Share some of what you've told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
So keep going.
So what did you tell Benjamin Netanyahu?
What do I say? I speak to him every day. He's a good man, doing a lot. Been very unfairly treated by his country, I think. Very unfairly treated.
He hasn't been unfairly. So he's a good man. He's been very unfairly treated. Netanyahu's not a good man. I would argue he's a genocidal world leader who is being done for corruption, is being treated very unfairly by his country. No, not really. He's being rightfully, hopefully the law will be rightfully applied to Benjamin Netanyahu.
Have you given him any indication that you may seek to aid them more than you have already?
No.
Do you give him any indication you're going to seek to aid Iran any more than you are already? Israel? No.
So far, he's done a good job. He has been treated very unfairly by his country. He's a wartime president, and he's going through this nonsense.
He's been treated very unfairly. He's a wartime president who's going through all this nonsense. Doesn't matter whether you're a wartime president or not. Like, the corruption allegations have been going on for ages. I mean, go and Google Netanyahu's and corruption and the legal case against him. It was way before this iteration of the conflict. So it's just absolute nonsense there. And then this is a real problem for me. So this is a rant against Caitlin Collins and CNN.
Mr. President, some of the supporters are split on the U.S. response to
Who you with?
CNN.
No.
There's a split,
Fake
though.
news. Fortunately, nobody.
Actually, it's not Caitlin Collins. It is another CNN reporter. But like, as he starts understanding he's getting a difficult question, it's like, okay, difficult question. Who are you with? And his go-to at the moment is always, if I get a difficult question, I slag off, because I don't get difficult questions from Fox, from Newsmax, from OAN, right-wing influencers. I get difficult questions from mainstream media who are representing, a much broader spectrum. And rather than have to deal with those questions, I will denigrate the source of those questions. And that deflects away from me having to answer them. And therefore, I only ever get easy questions, and I only answer easy questions.
Watch it.
But my question
That's
is,
how you stay in
watching
power.
CNN nowadays? I haven't seen it in a long time.
but some of your supporters are wary of the U.S. getting involved in another foreign war, and some believe that we should support.
Do you ever ask a positive question?
That tells you everything. Do you ever ask a positive question?
My supporters are more in love with me today, and I'm in love with them more than they were even at election time, where we had a total a landslide. We had, we won all 7 swing states. Did CNN report that? We won all 7 out of 7, which everyone said would be almost impossible. We won by millions of votes. We won 2,750 districts versus 505 districts.
So on and so forth. So you see what he does here, which is like, I've got a difficult question. I'll talk about how I won the election. Just completely switch it. It's a complete red herring. It's distraction. Oh, difficult question. You guys suck. Does anyone even watch CNN anymore? I bet you didn't report on the fact that I won in all the swing states, and I won, and you starts reading off these numbers, and then you've forgotten what she actually asked. I mean, it is an absolute exemplar performance in distraction and evasion. Like, this guy, therefore, is never caught on camera being put under pressure, and he's never showing himself to be someone that doesn't have the answers and not knowing what he's talking about, because he doesn't answer the difficult questions. He just refuses to answer them. Ugh. Anyway, there you go. I thought I'd play you this. So although I've stated my position, I meant to play this on actually my other video earlier today, but this is one way of seeing it.
Rogue state here that hasn't been mentioned is, of course, Israel, which has repeatedly broken international law, is committing genocide in Gaza, and knows exactly what it's doing in trying to ignite a regional conflagration here, in trying to tempt its major allies and defenders, the US and the UK, into a conflict. And we would be absolutely mad to fall for it.
Is your answer to Tony's question, who is more dangerous, Trump or the Ayatollah, Benjamin Netanyahu?
Yes. At this point in time, if you think about who is the leader right now that is responsible for creating the nation with the largest number of child amputees in the world, the largest number of journalists that have been killed in a conflict in God knows how long. This is an incredibly, incredibly dangerous man, and it is sickening that we are supporting him. Rogue state.
And I get that. I do understand these viewpoints. I just think taking out nuclear capabilities from Iran is it's much harder to go back from there. As in, it's much harder for them to regenerate that capability. Whereas if you have, if you go down the diplomatic route, the problem is the diplomatic route has kind of sailed, and it's sailed because Netanyahu is doing what he's doing. Like, irrespective of whether you agree with it or not, it is actually happening, right? And therefore, the military option for getting rid of nuclear capabilities is what is taking place now, and the diplomatic option is not taking place now. And actually, diplomatic option is also not as, I don't think it would ensure that Iran would fully get rid of its capabilities. That knowledge would still be there, that tech would still be there. Whereas if you physically destroy it and take out the people who were creating weapons of mass destruction, then I think it's much more difficult for Iran to bounce back, and then hopefully there'll also be a toppling of the Islamic theocracy there. But I admit that it is not an easy argument to make. Rory Stewart here quotes President Eisenhower: "We cannot in the world, any more than in our own nation, subscribe to one law for the weak, another for the strong, one law for the opposing us, another for those allied with us, one law for those opposing us, another for those allied with us." And that is kind of what I'm saying, except I'm actually moving slightly away from the law because I think the law just isn't clear enough here. I think it is murky. I mean, literally, like Article 51 in the UN Charter is one that's open to massive interpretation, that doesn't really speak explicitly enough about preemptive strikes, which is what this is. And so I then move towards my kind of moral consequentialism of saying, well, irrespective of that, I just think the world is a better place if you... So it's a bit like so Doris next door, she's got a right drugs den, right? And it is causing problems in the neighborhood. It seems like, you know, there are going to be people that are going to be worse off in the neighborhood because there's this massive drugs den next door that Doris is in charge of. And the police aren't really doing anything about it. It's all take a bit too long a time. So, you know, is it right that I break down the door myself and smash up all the drugs paraphernalia and her ability to create stuff, essentially take the law into my own hands? But that will benefit our community, undoubtedly benefit our community, that there are no drugs paraphernalia in that house that's been fully destroyed. You know, her ability to manufacture those drugs there. And I would say, yeah, so that is I have broken the law. I've been a vigilante effectively. I've gone into that house and I've smashed up the stuff. And that is for the benefit of us all, but I didn't follow the letter of the law. And I think there are some times where you can justify that. But preferably the law would be better. But it's just that in this case, the law isn't being, as in there isn't like UN justification for this. So there's no. And the other problem is that we don't really have a world police. So these analogies break down because actually we don't have people that go around the world smashing up stuff or going in and with the kind of jurisdiction the police have over Doris's house and Doris. Like, they can go in, they can force themselves in, they can take stuff away, and they can lock her in prison. We don't really have the analogy of that that is not quite analogous to what goes on in the world. And so we don't have the world police. We have the UN, and the UN is arguably not fit for purpose. Now, should we try and make the UN stronger? Yeah, but we need to reform the UN. We need the Security Council completely reformed. We need Russia out of that for a start, but then we're privileging all those that remain in the Security Council. So there's still issues with having like this two-tier system. And so, yeah, it would be great if we had a really robust legal system in the world that could act like the police, so that I wouldn't have to go, like my analogy was the police weren't doing anything and they're kind of ineffective. So I had to go in and smash up the stuff because that's the best way of getting rid of it right now. But you know, because the police are ineffective. Well, that in real life, the police aren't so ineffective, but they are in terms of international law and international law enforcement. There is no international police force. That's kind of the problem here. But anyway, I do recognise that I'm on really shaky ground there. Now, Indian Prime Minister Modi has told Trump that the ceasefire with Pakistan in May was a result of the direct military-to-military talks and not US mediation. This is a real clapback. This is Trump being put in his place. So Trump was like, if it wasn't for me and Marco Rubio, India, Pakistan would still be at war. We brought that ceasefire to fruition. And he said that, and at the time there were people going, no, actually that's not what happened. You had some military people from, I think the Pakistan military saying, no, that's not what happened. Now we've got the Indian Prime Minister, literally the Prime Minister saying that didn't happen. This was a response to Trump's statement that it was the US that helped achieve peace. And then you've got this here that I'm going to play, and this will be
I think the deal I'm most proud of is the fact that we're dealing with India, we're dealing with Pakistan, and we were able to stop potentially a nuclear war through trade as opposed through bullets. Normally they do it through bullets. We do it through trade. So I'm very proud of that.
प्रधानमंत्री मोदी ने Prime Minister Modi clearly told President Trump that during this entire episode, there was never any discussion at any level about an India-US trade deal or US mediation between India and Pakistan. The discussion to halt military action occurred directly between India and Pakistan through existing channels between both armies and was made at Pakistan's request. Prime Minister Modi firmly stated that India has neither accepted mediation nor does it do so and never will do. There is complete political unanimity on this subject in India. President Trump understood the details explained by the Prime Minister and expressed support for India's fight against terrorism. Prime Minister Modi also said that India now sees terrorism not as a proxy war, but as a war.
Essentially, this should be a massive diplomatic well, it shouldn't be a spat, but this is a huge fact check in public of what Trump is claiming. And this is India, a nation of 1 billion people, Narendra Modi, very powerful person, just saying absolute BS. Trump is talking nonsense. He's effectively lying, and he's saying it firmly. As your man here said, the Foreign Secretary of India, he says, Modi firmly denies that this happened. So, wow. I think that's really significant. As Republicans Against Trump says, Trump is a pathological liar. That should be huge news, but so much is going on. The crazy times at the moment. But what that tells us is whenever Trump says anything, we should be questioning whether it's true or not. He just cannot be trusted. There's no way that man can be trusted in what he says. So when it goes back to Iran and Israel, is he just listening to Benjamin Netanyahu? Almost certainly, because he seems to be ignoring his intelligence community that whose report in March stated that they aren't intending to create a nuclear weapon or similar. So we need to be very careful with what Trump says. I don't want to relitigate the whole Iran-Israel thing again. Go and check my video out from last night and then my addendum today. Okay, in the meantime, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.